Welcome back to my channel. In my previous videos I put forward a radical theory on just how the Egyptians move heavy objects. The mechanism works by rotating a load about its centre of balance. This rotating table is supported on a type of hybrid thrust bearing made with a multitude of calcite rollers. Now all machines with moving parts require lubricant of one sort or another, even stone rollers. Now many of these rollers are still displayed in museums around the world. Now early on in my research I read a paper regarding the contents of these jars, or rollers, found at Deir el-Bahrain. The purpose of the study was to determine trade links during the reign of Hatshepsut. The samples were studied first with infrared spectroscopy, basically a fingerprinting technique. It's useful for confirming the presence of organic material and offering a general information about the composition of the sample. Many of these jars still retain the visible remains of their ancient unguents. Since Egypt had virtually no source of resin internally, and since the commonly available resinous sources are located both to the south of Egypt and to the north in the Mediterranean, the contents of these jars can provide at least some evidence whether resins during her reign were coming from one or both of these areas. They contain balsam, heated pine pitch, animal fat with traces of malachite. Now pine pitch is used as a glue or thickener for the animal fat. It makes a type of tallow for a thick grease. As you may have gathered from my previous videos, I do connect Ezekiel with green-eyed malachite. This evidence suggests malachite was used as a pivot, holding a calcite roller in position. Now how the grease was kept and transported didn't concern me at the time. I assumed that at the end of each trip, the machine would be dismantled and carried back to the quarry, and the calcite rollers would have been serviced at that point. However, I thought about it a little more, and I remembered a lecture given by at my local Egyptology society by Dr. Joan Paddingham. This was back in, I think it was April 2018. Now she associated head cones with the opening of the mouth ceremony, referring to the papyri of Ani. Joan also examined gold of honour scenes in which showed that what the individual did during the lifetime. Scenes depicting the individual receiving a golden necklace or shibai from the king. This was for their service and was common in these New Kingdom elite tombs. When the individual is presented to the king at the beginning of the scene, he never has a cone on his head, but once he has received the necklace, he is depicted with the cone. In fact, the cone features in 78.6% of the adulation scenes following the receipt of the necklace, and in 83% of the scenes showing the recipient driving away in a chariot. Joan concluded that this was because a mere mortal cannot be in contact with the deity or king. They must be transformed to receive the divine golden necklace, and the cone on the head represents this transformation, or transfiguration, that would take place during the intense emotional experience. Now I associate the broad collar or necklace with the calcite rollers, and perhaps the lubricant needed and the wax cone were one of the same. Perhaps the elite individual made wax cones as a gift to the artisans who operated the mechanism, and in return the king would give them a necklace as a gift from the king. To me that makes more sense. I wondered why they put a tub of grease on the head. How did they fix it there? And what was the practical reason for doing it? Luckily, 2 wax head cones have been discovered at Tel Amarna. Now new findings from the Amarna project confirms the existence of 2 three-dimensional wax head cones in 2 non-elite burial sites. The cones found at Amarna were constructed of beeswax formed around a wad of textile material or linen. The wax shows signs of infestation with many holes caused by insects burrowing throughout. The linen seemed to have been wrapped around a black-brown organic material. Now the contents I assumed to be a type of tallow or grease. Now I researched waxed linen and found that we use waxed linen today as an alternative to cling film or foil. An early plastic, if you will. So the basis for the experimental cone began with waxed linen. I melted some beeswax and brushed it over a circular piece of cotton. I used an old t-shirt, and this was great had a waterproof material that I could wrap around a mould. I used an old aerosol can with a dome top. However, the waxed linen was cold and forming it around the can proved quite difficult. So I decided to put some heat into the linen and placed it in the oven in between two pieces of foil. Now that seemed to work okay, but the wax was hot and would have stuck to my hand without the foil. I noted the problem and continued on. For the contents, I substituted the resin with beeswax. I heated the beeswax and the animal fat in the oven. I realised pouring a hot mixture into the wax cone would dilute the beeswax container and perhaps deform the shape too. So I placed the broadleaf to act as a barrier between the hot tallow and the cone, and that seemed to work okay. And once the cord had cooled down, I needed to seal the bottom. Again I used beeswax, but much thicker to cover all the creases. I placed the cone in about 5mm of melted wax. I lined the container with a leaf to prevent the wax from sticking to the container. It all worked great and I was really pleased with the results. But thinking on, I was concerned about the oven process. Putting waxed linen into an ancient oven, it could easily catch fire. And I thought about the problem for a while, and then the penny dropped. If the mould was hot, the cold linen would form to the shape of it. It was then I came across some funerary cones. I wondered if they could be used as a mould. The Theban necropolis has yielded most known funerary cones. They have a stamped text on the bottom and it typically bears the name and titles of the deceased person, often including additional information. Any number of cones might exist for any one person, and they provide a considerable amount of information of many non-royal ancient Egyptians. The terracotta would certainly take the heat, and a stamp could be used to form an impression on the bottom of the wax cone. The information would inform the artisan working on the cherubim who made the cone and reward them accordingly. So we decided to make one, because if you don't do, you won't know. So this is the wax head cone. It's cold at the minute, and you can see the wax cloth. If you place it on the top, it doesn't really conform, doesn't keep to the shape, so you couldn't really pour anything in it. So we'll take this and put it in the oven now and do an experiment when it's hot. Okay, so your wax is melted. If the wax is melted, the funerary cone's hot enough. So now you've got your stiff waxed cotton. Place that over the top. Put your leaf inside. Okay, just let that cool down now. Okay, it's cooled enough now, so you can take it off, and you can see the insert here. You've got your leaf. Okay, you've got your void inside now. You can fill that up with the grease and then fold the top over. Okay, we'll just see whether it's gone. Yeah, that's melted enough. It's a bit scary. Pour this in here. Okay, that's it. Okay, so your grease is cooled off now, it's inside there, so it's gone solid. Okay, but we need to fold all this over now and seal the bottom, but it's a bit too big, so I'm going to have to trim this down. So the leaf's in there, protecting this layer. So if you fold this in, like that, and we'll seal the bottom. I'll just go and get the rest of the wax out of the oven, and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so we've got the wax, 2 bars of wax are melted in that bowl. So we just need to place it in the bowl and let it go hard. Okay, so it's come out of the freezer. Okay, so we warm the bottom of this steel pan, cut round the edge. There we go, we got the bottom. And then I'll heat up the remaining wax and I'll make a seal for the bottom. Okay, so we've got some hot wax in here. Pour the hot wax in the top of the seal. Okay, so you pour some hot wax into the seal on the top, and then pour and we just let that go off. Okay, so try and pull it apart now. There we go. We've got the impression there. See that? And it's left an impression of a jed in there. Sell by date. Used before, made by, stuff like that.